Good afternoon from the Mackinac Policy Conference. We're here with Detroit School Superintendent, Dr. Nikolai Vitti. How are you?
I'm good.
Want to hop right into the conversation here.
Sure.
There's been a huge focus on K-12 education, not just at the city level, but at the state level, and even more nationally, as we're talking about how we align for future growth in
Yeah.
the state of Michigan. And yesterday, you were a part of a really impactful panel group hosted by the Balmer Group that included a counterpart from the west side of the state and a public-private partner and Huntington Bank Chairman Gary Torgo. Talk a little bit about why the state needs to put a deeper emphasis on K-12 education if it plans to continue its upward trajectory into the future.
Well, I think, well, one, I think education is the key, especially public education is the key to make sure that we deliver on students understanding and realizing their talent. Every child in Michigan, east side, west side, across race, every child's talent is talented. And I think we forget that the majority of children and families access traditional public education. And so if the public school systems across Michigan are supported and performing at their highest level, then we're not going to see the talent of our youth realized. And then that translates into workforce development opportunities or lack of opportunities. And so I think when we look at the greatest challenges facing Michigan, one of them is population decline. And if we're going to continue to be competitive in this nation and internationally, we have to have more people live in Michigan and move to Michigan and stay in Michigan. And I do think strengthening K-12 education has to be part of that equation.
I mean, because right now, if you look at a big factor that's stopping people from moving to Michigan
Yeah.
is the fact that we rank 44th in education nationally.
Yeah, it's certainly a contributing factor. I don't think it's the number one issue, but it's certainly a challenge that I think as a state we have to work together on solving. And I think what you saw in yesterday's panel is you have, a West Side leader, a school leader, you have the business community, and I'm optimistic that as we move into the future, we can have more Democrat, Republican, business, school, teacher unions, everyone owning the problem, but also working together for the solution.
How do we, specifically talking about Detroit, how do we implement something in the short term that's going to help move the needle? Because we have higher than average illiteracy rates, we have chronic absenteeism, and as you pointed out yesterday, that chronic absenteeism, once you hit over a certain number of days,
Yeah.
the fall off rate just grows exponentially. But what can we do in the short term to ensure that there's at least a stopgap so we're not getting worse and we're actually moving the needle toward a better future?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the work that the board and I have been committed to the last 8 years, we're starting to definitely turn the corner. I mean, when you look at our enrollment has increased for the first time in 20 years, the market share in the city, meaning the percentage of school-age children that attend Detroit public schools, meaning traditional public education, has increased. Chronic absenteeism, average daily attendance now has improved and above or at where it was before the pandemic. Our literacy, our math, our SAT rates are highest than they've ever been. And our trend line, when you look at literacy, math, and SAT, is improving while the state is stagnant or declining. So in Detroit, as a school system, we're definitely doing something better and different than the entire state as a whole. With that said, we own that we got to continue to do better. We're not doing laps around the city saying, we've arrived. I think what we're saying is we're improving. We haven't seen improvement in well and over 20 years.
Right.
And so it's just continuing to refine our systems, our processes, continuing to improve talent. Like our teacher development and our teacher recruiting levels are the highest they've been in years. We're leading Metro Detroit in teacher retention. We brought arts and music back to all of our schools, physical education. The next step for us is continuing to improve achievement, but I think it's also about taking a look at our high schools Our K-8s, our K-5s are moving in the right direction. And our graduation rate now is at 78%, only 4% away from the state average. But too many students find high school irrelevant. And what I'm trying to do in the next couple of years is implement a high school redesign, which I think is going to be a model for the state, which is offering differentiated diplomas. The minimum level of credentials will be defined by the state. That will stay the same, but we want to offer different diplomas. One, an honors degree, where if you're taking a certain number of advanced placement classes, honors classes, that'd be one degree or diploma. Another diploma would be a career tech type of diploma. So a student who's taking career tech classes, whether they're carpentry, HVAC, plumbing. And then the other one would be a dual degree, where you can get your associate's degree at the same time you're getting your college degree. So bottom line is trying to make the junior and senior year more relevant to college in the world of work. Because really by 9th and 10th grade, a lot of kids, if they don't think they're going to college, they're asking themselves, why are they here? What are they really learning?
And those sorts of programs develop pipelines either to
Correct.
careers or to four-year institutions upon graduation.
And that's been the talk at the state level. I was a part of the growing Michigan Together task force that Governor Whitmer created, and education was one of the focal points. But within that conversation was, how do we better connect high schools to colleges? And for us, it's Wayne County Community College. It's there are multiple branches, multiple campuses in the city. My vision in the future is to get every junior and senior at the high school level connected to a program there, or maybe even Henry Ford, Lawrence Tech, Mercy, in smaller numbers. And I think it's just going to be a win-win for students, universities, and ultimately the workforce.
I want to switch lanes just a little bit. During Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan's talk yesterday, in his unofficial campaign for governor, he talked about, the state school board not reporting directly to the governor.
Yeah.
And how that sort of impacts outcomes. And he has a plan where I think he wants to own more of the responsibility of the state's education outcomes.
Yeah.
In Detroit, obviously the mayor doesn't have control of the school system. What's your preference? Do you prefer to be an independent operation and only report to a state superintendent? Or do you prefer that direct hierarchy within the city where you're reporting to the mayor? And do you think that, the state superintendent or I'm sorry, the results of the state's school system should be incumbent upon the governor to handle?
Well, fortunately, I've worked in a couple different states in my career, and I would say, looking at Michigan's state system, it's flawed. The state system. I do believe that the governor should have more influence over who the state superintendent is, and possibly the state board of education. One of the two. I mean, if I think the governor at minimum should be able to appoint the state superintendent, and then maybe you still have an elected state board, or that the governor appoints the members of the state board and then they pick the state superintendent. One of those two things have to change, because if it doesn't, I don't see Michigan creating new systems and processes to improve overall statewide achievement. The system is too incoherent. It's not aligned. And it's really hard to implement the kind of things that need to happen, whether it's curriculum that's aligned to the standards, whether it's required training of teachers and literacy before they start, whether it's how we measure schools and hold schools accountable. It's too fractured and fragmented right now. And the result of that is a disconnect between the governor, the House or the Senate and the state board. You have all these different entities, and to some extent, even local school boards. They're just disconnected and fragmented. And I think anytime you're thinking about scaled, complicated reform, you have to have alignment. So I'm in favor of a change at the state level. I wouldn't change anything as far as at the local level. I think you still should have an elected school board, and that school board appoints a superintendent. But I would say that over time, if that school district isn't showing improvement in achievement, or has had a lot of issues with their finances, then I do believe the governor should be able to step in and appoint, state board member or local school board members. But I think you have to have a clear, defined a definition of a lack of improvement until something like that happens. But there's statutes that exist. We saw the tragedy of what happened in Detroit with emergency management. So I think we have to be very careful before that's exercised. But those are some of my opinions at the state level. Moving down in Detroit, I don't think mayoral control is the right solution. I think we people fought long and hard to get an elected, empowered board back to the city. And I think over the last 8 years, we've definitely made improvement. And I think the local empowered board deserves the right to continue to do their work. And I haven't really heard a mayor candidate talk about mayoral control again. I think people have raised concerns about the school system, but not to the point of saying that the mayor should take it over.
Yeah, I've not heard that outright from a candidate yet myself. I want to just go here real fast. People look at states like Mississippi, who have, they've been the poster child for failing K-12 education systems in America for a long time. But they've just been on this, what's called the Mississippi Miracle, right? Where they went from 49th in education rankings to 9th.
Yeah.
And they did it in a pretty unique way.
Yeah.
Why can't Michigan do the same thing?
I think it goes back to the conversation we had about the fragmentation of state systems. Mississippi, over 10 years, was very focused, disciplined on a plan to make sure that their teachers were trained in the science of reading at the K-3 level. It's what we're doing in Detroit. We start talking about the science of reading before anyone was really talking about it in Michigan. And that was based on, the story behind that is, I'm dyslexic. Some of my own children are dyslexic, and there's a certain way you have to teach literacy the children who are dyslexic. But that process is beneficial to all children, especially children that are below grade level. So I started to implement those systems back in Jacksonville in Florida, and I brought them here when I came to Detroit. But with all that said, they were intentional about their assessments, being very explicit to know what children knew and what they didn't know, and they had the right interventions. They had systems in place to prevent students in third grade from moving on unless they were intervened with. And then they aligned their assessments. Their state assessments are aligned to NAEP, the National Assessment for Educational Progress, and that was their end goal. They said they had to do better on NAEP, and so all their state assessments aligned to that. So when kids took tests in local school districts, you already knew how they would do on NAEP, and they got familiar with that test. Teachers got familiar with that test. So it's, I joked yesterday in the panel, it's less of a miracle. Maybe it's a miracle that people actually work together and change state systems, but that was the miracle.
But it's not like they're cheating systems, though, right?
No,
they're putting in the work.
Yeah, it's aligned, coherent systems that are then implemented. And so, I guess to be sarcastic, the miracle is people actually work together, to create the right system so kids can achieve.
So I got to ask you this: what's stopping Michigan from doing the same thing? What's
politics? I mean, it's politics right now. It's the fragmentation. It's that you have a governor, and depending on his or her party, it's not the party that's in charge of the House or the Senate. And then you have a state superintendent that is detached from the governor or the legislature. And so often, you can have, if you look at the governor's seat, you look at the state superintendent, you look at the House and the Senate and the state board, you really have five governance structures that could be going in 5 different directions.
Too many chefs in the kitchen.
Yeah. And so you need more of that alignment and coherency. So unless we have a miracle where we're going to have Democrats and Republicans somehow sit at the table and say, we're going to put aside ideology, right? We're going to put aside what our stakeholders seem to want and focus on best practice. Just take the Mississippi model. Massachusetts has been a leader in education for a long time. I mean, we know what to do. Unfortunately, we just don't do it. And that's the challenge.
One last question, and I'll let you get out of here. Dr. Rice is retiring.
Yep.
What do you hope to get from a new leader?
Well, I'm not interested. Not that you asked, but people have asked me. I'm not interested. I worked as deputy chancellor in Florida. I was number 3, very young then. I love what I'm doing now, and the board and I have a good relationship. As long as that maintains, and I feel like I'm leading, and I'm empowered to lead, always held accountable, but empowered to lead. I get a lot of satisfaction and joy. It's a great challenge, but being in Detroit, the next state superintendent has to be more of a visionary. I think he or she has to have a track record of improving systems. And they have to be clear with where they want to go. They have to have a good relationship with the governor. And at some point they have to agree to disagree and implement the right systems and structures that are lacking in the state.
Dr. Vitti, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.